So I see we've got Acta here. How are you, Acta? Welcome.
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks for doing this. I just did a fleet about you on Twitter.
A fleet?
Yes, a fleet. You know, like the stories. Here it is.
Gosh, I don't think I've ever been
Oh,
in a fleet before.
oh well, first
I'm
time for
honoured.
everything. There you are.
Refleet, everyone. Is that a thing? Refleet?
No idea.
Right, Acta had a question about picture profiles on the Sony cameras. And my knowledge of that is pretty basic. I only know what I know. But I'll tell you what I know. So I'm going to go back to my Sony camera so you can see the menus. So I'm going into my function menu. And up here where I've set the picture profiles to be part of the function menu. So picture profiles are really like ways of changing the image in your camera to give it more dynamic range or to give it more saturation. More dynamic range means that the limit between the lightest and the darkest parts of your image is going to increase. So on the Sony cameras it's called S-Log. On the Canon cameras it's called C-Log. I don't know what it's called in the other ones, but it's basically a log profile. And I don't shoot in log. I shoot in Cine 2 or in Cine 4. And the reason I do that is because that's what Sarah Dici does, and her video looks awesome. So that's just how I roll. So in my picture profiles, if I come down to picture profile 1, go to the right, you can see here that I'm using a Cine 2 picture profile. And the other one that I sometimes use is picture profile 10. Now you see when I go through these how it's changing that image, right? Picture profile 9, that's a log profile, so it looks really flat. So you get more dynamic range on your sensor, but when you get the image into your computer, it doesn't look good at all. You have to go into your editor and then start to apply color grading, and that's a whole science on its own. So I believe it's picture profile 10 has the Cine 4 profile. So those are the two that I use. And then what I do is I go into my editor. I switch cameras again. Back to my lovely coupon. I'm going to share my screen. So this is shot in Cine 2. And you can see the difference in how that one looks compared to how this graded image looks over here. It looks very flat, very low contrast, and quite low in saturation. So if we go into the color. Right, now every camera that you buy, you'll be able to download what's called Luts for your particular camera, which means lookup tables. It's basically like Instagram filters for your camera. You will get Luts for all of the different picture profiles. So you'll get an S-Log, you'll get a Cine 2, you'll get a Cine 4. So over here I've got some Luts, and these are the ones that I use pretty much all the time. This one here is the Cine 2 LUT. So you can see what the image looks like now. When I apply the LUT, it brings up the contrast, the saturation, and the benefits of doing this are that you get more dynamic range on the sensor, which really gives you more data to play with in your post-production, the result of which is that you can manipulate the image more and give you a much more pleasing image. It's kind of like the same as if you're shooting stills and you use RAW as opposed to JPEG. So if you don't use a picture profile for video, it's the equivalent to shooting in JPEG. You're basically allowing the camera to decide the saturation settings and the contrast and everything else. So when you bring it into your editor, you don't have as much latitude for changing any of those contrast or saturation levels. If you use one of the log profiles, then your image is going to come into the editor and look rubbish, but you've got much more data that you can use to manipulate the image and get something that you like. So when Ali did his class, someone asked him about picture profiles and he said, don't even touch it. And I do kind of agree. It's not necessary at all, particularly with the standard of cameras that we're getting these days. There isn't really any need for it unless it's something that interests you. And it does interest me, so that's why I do it. And everything I've learned pretty much I have got from Gerald Undone, who's one of my favourite YouTubers on the internet. He puts out content about cameras, about audio, and about all of this sort of technical colour grading stuff. And he's quite funny and entertaining as well. So I've already copied some links to videos of Gerald Undone's where he talks about what colour grading is, what log profiles are, and how they apply particularly to the Sony system, because that's what he uses as well. So at the end of this, you can jump onto the Notion page that we have at, what's the URL? weonlyknowwhatweknow.com. That will take you to the Notion page, and you can look up, if you want to, follow Gerald Undone's channel and learn everything you ever wanted to know about colour grading and LUTs and audio. And just to finish off, I'm going to show you my colour checker, which is another thing that I got from Gerald Undone's channel. So what I tend to do is I tend to use this. Let me just bring up my full screen camera. Where's my zoom window? 3 monitors, it's difficult to find things. This is a colour checker and it's set to 18% grey. So what I do is I get my camera. In fact, I can show you because I've got my camera plugged in, can't I? So I saw someone ask, it might have been you, Actor, you talked about how the exposure in your room can change based on what the clouds are doing and what sort of time of day it is outside. And Kareen dropped a link in the chat recently to a video by Becky and Chris, where Becky goes back to look at one of her first vlogs and she critiques herself, her past self of about 2 years before. And one of the things that she talks about is how she never used to worry about closing curtains and controlling light, whereas now that's one of the things that she will do in every video. So I know that having window light can look fantastic, but just beware that that light can change, particularly where I live. It's like in Scotland, if you don't like the weather, you just wait for 5 minutes. It's dark 1 minute, it's light the next minute. And it can be so frustrating when you set everything up and you're ready to go, and then the sun comes out and it's like, oh my God. So controlling lighting is kind of where we want to be, I think, for all of us. And that comes to white balance as well, which is what this colour checker does. So if we come to, these are the custom. Here we are, got it right. So you would line up the center spot and then click the shutter button. So see the circle in the middle? Press the button. Right, and that sets the custom white balance level for the exact lighting conditions that I'm in now. And so if you have it set to auto, it can change on you. If you have your ISO set to auto, it can change on you. So it's advisable to set your aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO and your white balance manually, and that gives you control over everything and nothing's going to change on you. So if something does change, it's going to be the lighting, and then you would just adjust the camera settings accordingly to match the changing lighting conditions. So that's your custom white balance. Once that's stored, then you can go shooting. The other thing that this card gives you is a colour checker. Let me get that menu out of the way. So that's your colour checker, and that's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about here, but this is another thing that you'll see on Gerald Undone's channel, when you can go in and actually make sure that your colours are accurate. So it depends how geeky you want to go. I don't bother with that because it's too hard for me at the moment, but who knows, maybe someday I'll be checking my colours as well. So That's me. I only know what I know. Thank you all for listening, and I'll be happy to take your questions.